Welcome to Manu Forti Ministries presents Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. I'm your host, Reggie Key, and today's guest is Kiara Jones. Kiara, what's going on?
Hey, how are you?
I am all right. How you doing?
Doing pretty good, hanging in here.
That's good. I'm glad to see that you're feeling better. I know we tried to do this a couple of weeks ago, and you had a cough that was lingering, and your voice was kind of weak. So I'm glad you have recovered, that you are abounding in strength. And I'm glad that you remembered, hey, look, I got to come back to this interview, though.
Yes, I was literally sick for a month, so I'm glad to be. Yes, I was sick my whole spring break. It was a mess. It was horrible.
That's
but
terrible.
I'm better. I don't have a cough anymore. I'm doing good.
Okay, good. Yeah, you sound strong. You look healthy. All right. I want to actually start in a little bit of a different place with you because those people, there are some who I have an extensive history with, and there are some who I just met. So just tell us real quick. Tell the people that's watching, like, how do we meet? How long have we known each other?
So I don't know when we met, but I would assume, like, I don't know if you've known me my whole life, but I was a flower girl in your wedding when I was pretty small. So I'm not quite sure, when we met, but it's been a while. I'm 22 now.
Yeah, so it was. I would guess that you were around 4 years old when you were in our wedding.
Yeah, I think so.
So that's been a while. I haven't known you since, like some people. I interviewed Jordan last week. I don't know if you remember who Jordan is, but he was saying when I was telling him about it, and I was telling Maya about it, my daughter actually, she was like, well, do I know Jordan? And I'm like, yeah, no, you don't know him. And then Jordan was like, yeah, tell her I knew her before she was in the womb. She was like, how is that possible? And I'm like, yeah, he knew you before you were born, like when you were still, but so I haven't known you since that long, but 4 years old is a pretty long time.
I think so.
So it's been, I mean, Kiara, to be really truthful, it's been really amazing to watch you mature and grow into this young woman who is kingdom minded and who's like on fire for God. So it's been a real pleasure, and I'm really grateful that you're here today because I want to continue to help, if I can help in any way, your trajectory, just to make sure that it continues in the path that I see for you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. I already told you this, but I love the show. I have been watching it the last several weeks, so I'm really excited to be here.
That's what's up. All right, so you kind of know how this is going to go. So here's my second question for you.
Okay.
Kiara, do you consider yourself to be a genius?
Okay, so I'm going to try to go back to before I've ever heard you speak on this.
Yeah.
I would say no. Just because I had only really thought about genius thinking about mainly book smarts, and actually as a child I really excelled and was in the gifted program and things like that. And then as I got older, I still do well in school, but just more on an average level. And I actually excel more in other areas. And so I wouldn't have considered myself a genius just because I still wasn't highest percentile academically, if that makes sense.
Right. No, it makes absolute sense. It's interesting, though, that you were in the talented and gifted program or some form of it. It goes by different names in different states. Yet and still, you didn't think of yourself as a genius. And to your point, many people just have this academic approach to it, or my GPA wasn't high enough, or my IQ. I don't know what my IQ is. And even if I took the test, I don't think it would be high enough. Right. But what I like in what you said in your response is, yeah, maybe not academically, but I know there's some other lanes that I excel at, that maybe you might be more comfortable in exploring that as it relates to your genius. And that's the very foundation of what we'll be talking about today is, what is your lane? Because it's in your lane, it's in your element that you will begin to find your genius. It doesn't look like everybody else's, and it shouldn't. It's not a cookie cutter thing. It's not exclusive to academia, right? There are many different forms, in fact, of genius, but we have to kind of deconstruct it, this word, and we also have to figure out what our associations are to this word, who our associations are, to then understand why we don't call ourselves a genius in the things that we know we excel at. And so that being the case, like who comes to mind? First picture, first image, first name when you hear this word genius.
Funny enough, I actually consider when I think of genius in the headspace that I'm currently in, I would actually look to like prominent church leaders that have built like amazing networks and things.
Okay.
I think genius. So the first person that actually comes to my mind right now is Apostle John Eckhart.
Got you. Okay.
And
go ahead.
I mean, this man has written book after book after book. I mean, revelation after revelation. It is just like, how can I'm like, where is he getting this revelation from? And just thinking about what he's been able to build, you know, in the US, but also reading his book, seeing what he's been able to build in other countries and sending people out. I'm like, that, like, he has a whole system. Like at one point he was releasing a book a month. Like that is not a joke. So that's the first person I think of at this moment.
Yeah, that's like not normal, right? Like he is operating on a whole other level. And for somebody like me, that's like, you know, an author, it's almost like to the point where you just want to close my laptop, like, you know what, let me pack it up, man. But that's the thing. We start getting in trouble when, and I'm not taking anything away from John Eckhart, right? But we start getting in trouble when we look at someone else thriving in their lane and then are like, well, that's not me, so I'm not genius.
Right.
I believe you got a book on the inside of you, but that doesn't mean that it has to be at the level of John Eckhart in its execution. It's more about the content. It's more about, Pastor Nikki and I talked about it. It's more about knowing your demographic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so John Eckhart is a good example, but you know, not everybody may not know him. So the more common name that comes to mind when I ask this question, by and large, is Albert Einstein.
Mm-hmm.
He's like the number one answer. If this was Family Feud, he'd be the number one answer, like at the top with all the points, right? And people, rightly so, again, I'm not trying to discredit Albert Einstein from anything, but what I am trying to get at is how when we identify this other person, most of us discredit ourselves because we compare what we're doing to what they're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
That becomes the problem because we start to discredit ourselves. We start to disassociate ourselves because of attaching this word to this person. And, you know, I'm doing all the name drops because you've seen some of these. Prophet Joanne, I love the fact she has this scripture in my mind now. I've memorized where it is. 2 Corinthians 10 and 12 talks about not comparing yourselves to yourselves.
Yeah,
like, we got to stop doing that, right? And so Albert Einstein, I believe he understood that this comparison is not good for the grander view of humanity, because there's a quote that he has that purportedly comes from him, at least, you know, internet kind of shady. You can't always trust what it's saying, but for the sake of this workshop, this interview, it works because there's this quote that he says that really encapsulates what I'm trying to get at. All right, so you ready for the quote?
I'm ready.
All right, it goes like this. If you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree, it'll spend its entire life thinking it's stupid.
Yes.
So how's that hitting you? Have you heard that quote before? You might have heard it in my interviews. Have you heard it before that?
I can't remember. You know what? I believe I've heard my big brother actually talk about that. Yeah, I think I heard that a few years ago, and I've heard different people, including you, say it. And I think it's true. And I actually, one of my lanes is actually teaching.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually work at a pre-K right now, and I've been working with kids in a school setting for almost 2 years now. And that's like actually a quote that comes to my mind a lot, because so many children think they're not smart, but it's like I'm able to see the ways that they're excelling. And it may not always be in the, you know, in the curriculum that we're doing right now, but I'm able to see, hey, but like I had one child, and he struggled with reading, but he had such like a business entrepreneurial mindset. Yeah. And so during reading, he would be making bracelets and making all types of things he can sell, because he doesn't want to face the fact that he's struggling with reading. But I was able to tell him, like, hey, like, you're not dumb. Like, this thing that you're doing with these bracelets and all these other inventions that you're making to sell, like, this actually takes thought. This actually takes math. This takes a strategy, like all those types of things. So I think it's really important. I think that quote is really important just to meditate on for all of us. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna get back to this young man you were talking about, because he reminds me of some young men that I encountered, and I tried to empower them with this idea that your genius is just not looking like what the school is servicing, right? This curriculum, the way it's being taught to you is not being taught to you in a way that's reaching you and tapping into what you do possess. And I like that you said too, what you said reminded me when you said, like, you see this business acumen, this entrepreneurship in him. And there are some of us whose genius does not require us to go to college. I mean, when you look at Bill Gates, I mean, him and his boy was like, you know what? We don't need to go to school for this. We already know for what, however it is. I mean, we, in our workshop, the gifted workshop, we talked about how, or at least I referenced something that Apostle Henderson spoke at our church when he said, look, what's the thing that no man taught you? There's a thing that the Holy Spirit taught you to do that no man taught you to do. And that's tapping into what you're gifted at, what your talent is. And if that thing is something that you don't have to cultivate in college, then it's okay to say that my pathway does not go through college, right? Maybe you, or maybe you do need college because you know what your genius is, but you don't have the business acumen and you need to access that business acumen. And one thing that's important about genius is not only recognizing your own, but then recognizing when and how it complements others and vice versa. Because being a genius doesn't mean that you know everything. That's not what it is. It's knowing what you have talent at, what you've been blessed to do that no man has taught you, versus, the other stuff that, you may need to partner with somebody to get something to come to pass. But let's get back to the quote though. So I often have, I should start probably putting this image in, but I have an image that I use when I do this workshop, and it shows this big tree trunk, and the tree trunk has the quote on it. And at the bottom of the tree trunk is this little fish. It's probably about as little as your fish. What's your fish name? Kairos. It's about as little as Cairo. And its eyes are real big because it's trying to hold on to the root of the tree to climb it. And the thing of it is, like, nobody is telling this fish, like, you don't belong on the land. You belong in the water. That's your lane. That's your element. And so, like, what's going to happen to this fish if it stays out of the water, if it stays out of its element?
It's going to die.
It's going to die. And, my concern is not that people are dying because they don't recognize their genius, but their genius potential itself is dying. It's like your phone being, away from the charger long enough. If it's not connected to its source, it's just going to slowly dissipate and then just tap out.
Right.
And I don't want people's geniuses to tap out because we need it. The world is groaning in anticipation of all of us walking in our genius. So the problem that this fish has in this metaphor, in this example, is that somebody is coming along and putting a label on it that's not the right label. But because it doesn't understand who it is and how it was built, what it was designed to do, is eventually apparently listening to this mislabeling and trying to fit itself within something that's not even how it should be defined in the first place.
Right.
And we do that all the time to ourselves. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I see it, for me, I see a twofold problem. Like, I see the person who's labeling the fish probably is not in their genius. And then the fish itself is not in their genius. And so it's a twofold problem, because if you have people, and, it kind of gets into the mountains of influence and all the things that you're familiar with. But as believers, I feel like especially it's important in our sphere of influence to bring the kingdom with us, to bring our genius with us, so that we can pull those things out of others. Because if not, even if we're not the ones at the top of our mountains bringing this perspective with us, then we can't influence the next generation or the people under us to be able to walk in that genius, if that makes sense.
Go ahead, teacher.
So I see it like, have you seen you've seen Abbott Elementary?
Yep.
I watched Abbott Elementary, and you see Janine. She just has all these passions. She thinks that this school could be so great. She thinks that kids can do anything. And that's the kind of people that we need in every single sphere of influence, but not only bringing the passion, but also, of course, the kingdom, so that, you know, the next generation can see the potential on the inside of them.
Absolutely. So, you know what, in that same vein, two of the people who I interviewed recently, one of them being Jordan, and I can't remember the other one right now. Oh, it was Pastor Nikki, actually. They told me about when they were younger. So I should probably preface this with something else. So I'm gonna get back to the young man that's making these bracelets that's in your class, right? The example that I give that fits right into that is about these 10 little boys who I met one year. They were all in third, fourth, and fifth grade, and they were all on IEPs, or what we would have called special ed back in the day. So these 10 boys are in one class all day, alienated from the rest of the class, and labeled with ADHD, labeled with ADD, labeled with emotional disorders, right? Because I mean, truth be told, they had outbursts in class that disrupted the class, and they couldn't focus on what was being taught to them. So they was like, hey, look, for the sake of the majority, we're going to alienate this minority group, right? And literally put them in a class by themselves, which is not right. Third, fourth, and fifth graders are learning at different levels. They shouldn't all be in the same class, right? And so when I started asking them, hey, tell me what, you know, first of all, I told them that they're a genius, and they looked at me like I was crazy, like, who are you talking to? Like, I ain't no genius. So they were already, you know, had these labels put on them. If I say, hey, look, you have ADHD, they probably be like, yeah, you're right.
Right.
So they're already just fish out of water and accepting these labels from other people that aren't right. They're not accurate. And so getting into the first part of the genius equation, passion, you know, when I ask people what you're passionate about, I'm actually asking you, what do you hate? Because the thing that you hate is the thing that you are meant to fix in this world. And the reason why you hate it is because you see that this brokenness affects you in a negative way. And you're like, I don't like how this feels. And as you get older, you're like, I don't like it when I see other people affected and afflicted the same way that I was. Right. And so I always ask, one of my first questions, aside from are you a genius, is tell me what you hate. So these little boys, they had an easy question. They had an easy answer for me. They was like, we hate school, Mr. Key. Now what? Now what you gonna do? And I'm like, I'm so glad you said that, because first of all, I'm not going to tell you like, oh, you can't hate school. I'm like, you should. I get that you hate school because it's alienating you. It's like telling you that you are not fit for this environment, which is partly true. So they don't fit because the learning style that they manifest, like, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but there's like 7 or 8 different learning styles. Yep. The learning styles that they possess is not the learning style that they're being taught from.
Right.
So, you know, what do schools do? Schools are visual, schools are auditory, and schools approach things from a left brain perspective, right? Logical. So if you don't speak one of those 3 languages, what your language is one of the other 4 or 5 languages, then you're going to feel out of place. Like, this information that's being given to me, I don't understand it. They're telling me that I got to sit still and I need to. So this gets to Pastor Nikki and Jordan. Pastor Nikki and Jordan both told me that they had a teacher, and this speaks to your point. They had a teacher who identified, that was like, you know what, go ahead and walk around. Go ahead and walk around the classroom, kind of feel things out. They recognize what I believe is either it's called exploratory or expeditionary learning. Well, you got to be hands-on with it. But if you're told in school, like, nope, sit down, be still, don't touch anything, and the person is not able to recognize, like, you have a different learning style, then now you have this fish out of water element. Because one, like you said, somebody is coming by and misjudging them and trying to make them conform to a bigger system. And then also the fish doesn't understand that, hey, I have this perspective that's different from what they're saying.
Right.
So why wouldn't you hate the school system is broken? Why wouldn't kids hate that? But here's where the genius begins to come in, though. I told them, so they thought they had messed up my whole workshop. I said, look, if you think about what I just said, and I told them how the thing that you hate is the thing that you were put on this planet to fix because it's broken. I said, then each of you that told me you hate school, you're a future educator.
Right.
And I love the response, because it's not just those little boys. Whenever somebody in a workshop is like, I hate math, I hate this, I hate that, I'm like, you're a future math teacher then. Because their learning style needs to become a teaching style that then reaches other learning styles.
Right, exactly.
That aren't being serviced. And so that's like revolutionary. instead of marginalizing the problem and marginalizing really the solution to the problem, we need to be addressing it and identifying it and being like, you learn this way, and then getting them in an environment where they can be taught in the way that they learn.
Yeah, I agree.
So
Yeah,
the little boy, I'm like, yo, as soon as you say he makes braces, I'm like, he probably an expeditionary learner. He got to learn through exploring and putting his hands on something.
right. And it's funny because that you talked about the walking around, because that's like a very Montessori approach. Montessori preschool when I was a child. So I'm very familiar. Awesome. But working in a school setting now at a pre-K, I understand that, teachers don't necessarily have the resources to be able to in that environment. Like, listen, it's 20 of y'all, it's one of us. Like, if y'all we can't just have everybody walking around, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so that kind of gets into, for me, I kind of like to look at things at a systemic level. Like, what can we build? What can we create that would just create a whole new system? Because the system that we already have is just lacking the resources. It's lacking the proper foundation to be able to make this happen. And so kind of no matter what we do, there can be some small improvements, but someone's always going to fall through the cracks.
Yeah, that's true. What you're saying is absolutely true, because it is a systemic issue. When we start focusing on what you hate, it's never something small. It's something large that's been built, that when we try to get on the inside of it, we're like, this doesn't feel right for me. Right. And so ideally, I mean, if you look at, how and why schools were built, they were built to basically create factory workers, like cookie cutter factory workers. They were turning out people who could go into this industrial revolution and populate these factories so that these items can be built. That was, capitalism and all this other type of stuff. So without getting all into that, though, if the school system was structured in such a way that, hey, we have each of the 7 or 8 different learning styles represented in classrooms, and then there are tests to figure out what your learning style is, and the children were placed grade level, but at each grade they were placed in a class that spoke their learning language, then that's changing the game.
Right.
That's making sure nobody's left behind. I think that these labels of ADHD and ADD will become things of the past, because now we're getting people in their lane. This fish is now in water, and we're going to watch it thrive. Watch this fish take off and do what it was designed to do in a way that it was designed to do it. So, that's what this is all about. Like, what is it that drives us? Because when we start approaching systems, and with our little cells, we'll have a David Goliath mentality. Like, I don't care how big the system is. I'm about to throw a stone at it. I'm about to do something to make this thing respond to me and to correct an error that I see in it. So that being the case, like, Kiara, what's your passion? Like, what do you hate?
I hate to see people not have the resources they need. And I think the first time that I really started to notice this is in high school. I went to really good schools, thankfully, and I was in a college prep program for all 4 years of school, and it was for minorities who were excelling. And so,
doggone it, you got all this background, and you still was like, I'm not a genius, though. Okay, go ahead.
So it was like, it was like they identify you from your middle school grades, and if you're doing well in 7th and 8th grade, they bring you in the program the summer before your freshman year of high school. And we did it all the way up until we graduated high school. And so, we went on all these college trips. We, like, our senior year, they gave us a whole timeline, everything we would need to get into college. They gave us access to scholarships other people didn't have access to. Yeah. I mean, they were having conversations with our parents about the FAFSA, like everything, so that there was no barrier between us and college. And we all went to college. I mean, it worked, but all I could think about the whole time was, okay, hold on. We are a small group of minorities in this high school. I went to a very diverse high school. There were lots of minorities, but I'm like, what about all of these other children? Just because someone isn't excelling in 7th and 8th grade doesn't mean that they don't have potential.
Right.
And it really bothered me because I would see some of my friends who weren't in the program, the way that they were struggling. You know, they might have been first generation college students as well as some of us, but they didn't have anyone talking to their parents or teaching them how to write a personal statement. And even when I think about it now, it just makes me really mad because I'm like, okay, what about them? Like, they can't just fall through the cracks. And so, and yeah, and I begin to see it even as I teach and, you know, work in school settings. I just really don't like when, I really hate it when, you know, people don't have the resources that they need to be successful. So yeah.
And see, you know, as you were saying that, it reminds me of like this whole, I'm bringing up this word again. I don't know why this word is on my mind today, but like capitalism, where basically the rich get richer. And it's like they have access. So naturally, they're going to be able to thrive because they have access just by way of their socioeconomic status, right? But they keep excelling while people who don't have access continue to just, this gap, this margin just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's not the way that the kingdom is supposed to grow. Like, there's supposed to be a commonwealth that is evenly distributed. And by even distribution, you have to look at where a person is and be able to foster an environment that will allow them to thrive. Like when I talked to Pastor Nikki, the word that kept coming to my mind too was like a Garden of Eden. We have to, and this requires extensive work and extensive resources, but creating a Garden of Eden for people so that they can individually thrive or even thrive in groups, because I mean, it wasn't just Adam in the garden, it was Adam and Eve, right? And so giving people this space to be able to function specifically for how they were created is what we need in every system. So, you know, yeah, poverty is a real issue, but that's not your drive, and it's okay. I think we have to stop doing that too. That's what that person coming along and saying like, Fish, you should be, you know, you should be climbing this tree though. That's like somebody coming to you and saying, I hear what you're saying, Kiara, that's all good and fine, but what about the impoverished in the United States and in the world? You should be focusing on that. Like, no, why should she? That's not what your passion is.
Right.
Like the thing of it is, God is grieved by all these things, this brokenness in the world, this imbalance, this injustice in the school system, this lack of resources, this imbalance and injustice in, you know, socioeconomic structures, right? But he's broken your heart with some of the grief that's in his heart for a particular reason. He's like, look, I'm gonna expose you to some things at a young age, and you're gonna have the wherewithal to look around you and say, this is all good for me, but what about my friends though? How they getting left behind? I don't feel good about that.
Right.
God sees them and he doesn't want them left behind either. So he gives us a portion of his heart that's broken and says, I need you to do something about it.
Right.
Because, you know, what I tell people a lot of times is if you keep harping on the same thing, every time you see it, you speak about it and you get passionate about it and people start to roll their eyes, they're like, here Kiara go again, talking about this school. Right? When you start to hear that, you're getting a clue. And if you start saying like, somebody should do something about it, like, guess who that somebody is though?
It's right. It's you.
It's you. You built to do something about it. That's why it aggravates you to no avail.
Yeah.
So you know, from what I never even knew this about you, like that you had this type of passion, and that you had this type of access and exposure, but didn't let it like blind you to what other people were not having around you. And so, you know, the question then becomes, all right, well, if I've identified what I'm passionate about based off of what I hate, based off of what's broken in the world, then the natural question becomes, well, if something is broken, like I should fix it. How?
Right.
Right. And so, you know, what happens to you when something's broken in your room, right? In your dorm or at your house when you're home with your mom or whatever? Like, what happens when something is broken? What's the first thing you start to look for? Like, what do I need to fix this? What do you look for?
Some tools.
You look for tools. And so the next part of this genius equation is the tool part. Like, your talent is the God-given tool that he has given you to address this God-given passion that you have.
Yeah.
It's like Moses. When Moses was given his assignment and told, look, this is going to be your genius path, he was like, but I don't speak well. And he started giving all these excuses. And then one of the things that God said to him was, dude, what's in your hand though?
Right.
And he saw this staff, and you know what happens? He turned the staff into a serpent and turned the serpent back to a staff. He was like, you got all you need already right here. This thing that you overlooking, weren't you posting about what Apostle Larry was saying? Like, look, the thing that stop overlooking the thing that you already have to find what it is that you're looking for to get you to the next level.
It says, stop looking for what you've already found. It only leads to frustration.
Yeah, like you ever been looking for your phone? Like, have you ever done this? Like, man, where's my phone though? Like, I've done that before.
Notorious.
Simple, because this has so many features on it that assist us aside from talking that we forget that it's like the same tool, and you be like walking around like, I cannot find my phone. It's literally on your person, or you got it in your hand. And that's what the talent is like. God has given you a talent that is going to help address the thing that is driving you to fix something. And in fact, that's the whole equation. Your purpose in life is to figure out your God-given talent and apply it to your God-given passion, which will unlock your genius.
Yeah.
Because it's like, how in the Gospels we're told to go, the disciples back then were told to go to Jerusalem, then Judea, then Samaria, and then the rest of the world. Then like it's always starts internally and then it builds out. So your genius begins with this like, oh, I don't like how this make me feel. And then as you begin to address it and fix your environment, then it's like, okay, now genius is never about just keeping things to yourself. It's about who else can I help that's in this same situation that I can't stand. I have a solution for it and I need somebody else to get released from it too. Like the first person I had to say that was a genius was me, because until I could say like, hey, I'm a genius, then I can't identify it in other people.
Right.
So look, you're about to say something.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this all day, actually, how things start in seed form. So like for me, one of my talents is working with children, but I didn't know that was a talent until 2020. I truly didn't know, but I realized that I've been kind of working with children since I was like in middle school, actually. I didn't know. So like when I was in middle school, I was pretty much in charge of the youth praise team at the church I went to. I had to teach them all their parts, things like that. And then when I was in high school, I was actually a student conductor for a year. And so I would help teach songs. I conducted at the concert. But there were a couple times where my choir director wasn't there until they had a sub, but the sub didn't know music. So in order for us to actually have rehearsal, I literally had to teach them all by myself, and the sub was there for supervision. Right. And so just thinking about that, and then what I'm doing now, and even things I want to do in the future, it's just been occurring to me today that like it started in little seed form. It started with me saying, "Hey, sopranos, this is your part." When I was a teenager, and then now I'm able to see, okay, this working with children is actually a talent, though. I didn't know. I just thought, I don't know, especially when it feels like, okay, I'm a youth, and these are who's around me, and so I'm just kind of doing this thing. But as it's been something that I've done as an adult, now it's something I realize, okay, this is actually something everybody can't do. Like, I be having some real Abbott Elementary moments with these freaks. And I'm like, but you know what? I'm able to actually be effective in this environment, though. And so it's something that I'm still kind of discovering, but it's starting to really occur to me. So, yeah.
And that's what you got to do. You got to ponder the path of your feet. Like, what has been my exposure? What have I been around? Who have I been around? How have I interacted with them? And begin to see like, okay, the bigger picture of it. And so what I even see for you as you're telling me more and more about your passion and your talent, I don't know if you've had a chance to have the two intermingle, but there is a way that you can utilize your talent for music. And your talent, like you hear harmonization, you understand how each individual part can come together for the greater good. And so being able to identify like, yeah, no, you're not a soprano, you are alto though. And being able to get people in the right section so that their contribution, getting people in the right section is not like those little boys that were all in the same class. They put them all in the same section to push them to the side. But you are one who can organize and get people in the right section to then bring together this unity that says, I need you here. We need you here, and then train them up so that then they begin to be specialized and to create this orchestral type of environment where everybody is thriving, everybody is peaking and transforming into something that nobody has ever heard before, right? And so I see you being able to take your ability to teach music and bring that into the classroom, though, to address these issues, right? To both explicitly and implicitly, if that makes sense. Like the approach that you have to bring a choir together is the approach that you can bring into the classroom to bring these different learning styles together, which it's not easy. Coming into your genius is not easy. It's a puzzle piece. It's a puzzle that you piece together that you might not always get right the first time, but don't be discouraged by the fail that you may encounter, because the fail is just a first attempt in learning. And so as you begin to learn how to really access this one part of how you think and bring it into this environment with these kids, you're going to begin to see some things. You're going to see them transform, and you're going to see your environment transform. People are going to begin to come to you and say, what is it that you're doing that's got these kids thriving in a way that we haven't seen before? And then you'll be able to mechanize it, to get curriculum around it so that it can be reproduced for others to be able to utilize. So that's just the implicit part of it, right? Just taking the mindset. But explicitly, I see you being able to take music into the classrooms too, though, and being able to reach, because there's something about music that helps you learn without learning.
It does.
Jingles, and we learned our ABCs according to Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, right? I see you coming up with melodies, harmonies, and then in superimposing information onto it, because it's nothing for you to come up with music. Like, I've seen you do it. It's crazy. Like, you have this prophetic anointing to create something on the spot that then ministers to everybody in the room. And you can do that not only in the church, on the church mountain, you was talking about mountains, but on the education mountain as well.
Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of the times when I'm uploading, music to social media or YouTube, that's actually what I'm doing, like on the spot. Like when I'm singing the scriptures and things on social media, I'm literally opening, and I don't know how, obviously it's the Holy Ghost, because I don't know how this happens. I can't explain it, but I open up to the scripture, I start playing something, and it just comes to me. Like, it just comes to me. And the same is true though, and I actually use music to learn myself. So like when, let's just say I'm trying to memorize, like, I don't know, a term or something, I make up these songs or like these raps or like something, or like I'll say it like over these beats, and then I do like a voice memo on my phone, and then I listen to it, and that's how I study for tests.
Wow. See?
Yeah.
That's like a musical mnemonic almost. It's like a musical mnemonic device.
Yeah. It works. I learned that from a teacher in middle school. She taught us to do that. That's how she would teach us. And this is coming full circle. This brings us back to having the right people having influence. So this teacher, and it's funny because I'm a psychology major. This teacher, she had her degree in psychology, and she became a teacher, and she would use everything she learned in psychology to teach us how to memorize and retain information. And so she would be teaching us, let's say the parts of a narrative or something. And so she would have us do movements. She would have us sing them and do all of these things to get it on the inside of us. And that's something I've been doing since literally 7th grade. When she taught, I never forgot it. And so that's something in college has gotten me through. So it works.
See, and there can be a whole business on the inside of you centered around that. And it's what's the word that I'm trying to think of? A consultant, where you can come in to any environment and teach this. Because look, remember what I said? Genius starts with you first. You taught yourself that based off of this methodology that this teacher gave you. And now that you've seen and reaped the benefit and the fruit of it, you're like, all right, man, like, who else can learn from this? Anybody can. Anybody can, because I don't know too many people that are like, I don't like music.
Right.
They might not like a type of music, but there's some form of music that they like. And so to be able to imprint this information. And like you said, get it on the inside of you through music, because music just opens you up. You don't even have to think about it. It just opens you up. And so that's genius, Kiara. I just, you know, and I had a feeling you were already operating in it. So just really quick, because I want you to, I want to get your viewership up. I don't know where it is, but I want to get it up. What are you doing on YouTube? Because I know at one point it was called The Undoing, but you're saying that you may be reformatting it.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm relaunching my YouTube channel literally today. Today is April 13th. So by the time they see us, it'll already be up. But the name of the YouTube channel is called The Word Wide Open. And this is actually a name that the Lord gave me a few years ago. And it just occurred to me that it's kind of all encompassing of everything that I do. And so I think, you know, I sing the scriptures on there. I've taught on some things on the Word of God on there, but also I do some like lifestyle things on there, just like, you know, things that are happening in my life. And the reason that it all comes together is because, like, I'm not just singing his word, I'm not just teaching his word, but like literal the things that how I pick grad school, how I pick a job, like how I pick friends, like it's all based on the prophetic and the Bible, like literally his words, and me being in constant communion with him, it literally affects every single thing that I do. And so I'm back to posting videos. The first video with like the relaunch is coming out today. So by the time you guys see this, you know, several more videos will be up. So I'm really excited about it.
I'm excited about it too. I mean, you know, one thing I want to encourage you on too is the undoing was for a season. And a lot of the times, I'm gonna speak about me, and maybe it applies to you too. I think it does. But a lot of times when we do something for a season and then that season ends, we think of it as, oh man, you know, I didn't get that to the level that it was supposed to get to. But everything is a stepping stone. And just because the season may end, the things that you learn from it, you take with you, right? And so the next time you execute a thing, it'll incorporate what you learn, it'll incorporate what you're doing. And you already said it. You're like, this is everything that I've learned. And so I want to make sure that you don't see the season of the undoing ending as like, oh man, I failed. Because as long as you learned from it and it's helping you relaunch again. You know how many websites I've had since my first book of poetry? First was Stillwater's Poetry. And then I realized, like, I don't just write poetry, I write prose now. And then I realized, like, I don't just write prose now, I can speak now. And now, and everything that I learned that relaunched the website, I think I've had 3 or 4, is all present in what I'm doing now. And it's all encompassing. And that's what I see happening for you as well. So don't be discouraged. Do not despise small beginnings. And remember this too, commit your ways unto the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass.
Yeah. No, that was encouraging. I appreciate that. I do.
Yeah. Because sometimes, you know, I try not to look at viewership, because that can really be frustrating both for myself. And sometimes I would look at what you were doing with the undoing, and I'm like, Kiara, keep going. Like, don't be discouraged by what people are or are not saying, by what the views are and what they are not, because you're being obedient. This talent that's on the inside of us is the way that God speaks to us, though. And when we are obedient to how it speaks and what it's telling us to do and how to do it, that obedience is what's going to go before us. The scriptures say that the gift of God makes room for men, right? And so I see it going before you, making room for you, as long as you continue to listen to it, to adhere to it, to grow it, and to operate in it.
Yeah. So I'm excited. I think that I do agree with what you said. And I think for me, it was a little bit hard to get back to the point of relaunching, because it can feel like, okay, this didn't really go so well the first time. But I remember when I first started gathering people around the undoing, and I was doing it with some friends and posting videos, that the scripture that you said, don't despise, I think it's don't despise the day of small beginnings, maybe, or something like that.
It is the day of small beginnings.
Yeah. I remember Prophet Tiffany saying that to me, and I was like, okay, like this is not what I want to hear. But now I have such a different perspective. I'm like, okay, like I had something in seed form though. I did have a small beginning, and that's okay. And so, as you said, it's something that we can continue to cultivate. I have a better understanding of my talents now. I have a better understanding of my giftings now. And so it just, that was just like a launching pad to whatever else the Lord wants to do, through me. So it's exciting stuff. I'm excited.
Absolutely. You should be. So I'm going to end this interview the same way that I started it, by asking you, Kiara, do you consider yourself to be a genius?
I say, yeah, I think so.
Absolutely. Yes. And so again, thank you for taking the time to be here with me. This has been Reggie Key, your speaker, your guest host, your what else am I? I'm a workshop developer, author, and this has been Manu Forti Ministries, Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny, and it's my uncommon, I'm messing it up, but it's my uncommon cue to see the genius in you.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode. Make sure you pick up the book, Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny, by my dad, Reggie Legend, available on Amazon and at inkwellspoken.com. Connect with us at InkwellSpoken on all social media platforms. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.